Let's get into some of the more tactical aspects, some of the more tactical things that I like to talk about, and is the heart and soul of Code Red Conversations. There was a mayor out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, whose name is Jacob Frey. And he chose to ban all of his officers, forbid all of his officers from attending what he refers to as fear-based training. Programs such as Calibre Press's Police Survival or Street Survival or Killology by Colonel Dave Grossman or Bulletproof Mind by Colonel Dave Grossman, courses like that. He chose to bar or ban his officers, their officers, from attending training, this type of training. Here's the video.
Warrior is one who is intensely invested.
Thousands of officers across the country have received the training you're seeing in this video.
We got to survive 24/7.
It's run by groups called Calibre Press and Killology, who say they help officers identify threats and balance their use of force.
People are bulletproof. They're bulletproof.
But the mayor of Minneapolis has a different take.
Fear-based, warrior-style trainings like Killology are in direct conflict with everything that our chief and I stand for in our police department.
MPD pulled staff from the training last year. Now the city's officers are banned from attending, even if they're off duty.
The Minneapolis Police Department will, we believe, be the very first major department in the nation to prohibit fear-based trainings.
He can't prohibit what we're going to do on our own time or off duty.
Lieutenant Bob Kroll, head of the police union, says he'll fight the new policy during this year's contract negotiations.
For them to blanket limit it, yeah, I think it's illegal. If not, it's a labor issue.
Do you understand? You have the mission.
And he says the mayor is misrepresenting the training.
I think it would be beneficial for him to sit in on one of these trainings, and it's survival training.
Told to get his hand out.
But it has come under scrutiny, including here in Minnesota. Officer Geronimo Yanez, who shot Philando Castile, had received similar training.
In my preparation for this video, I did a little research on Mayor Jacob Frey. And I found out that he has no military or law enforcement background. I mean, I'm not shocked or surprised by that, according to anything I was able to find. Now, if there's some information out there that proves otherwise, then I'll apologize ahead of time. But from what I was able to ascertain and seek out or look for or research, I found no history whatsoever of any type of military or law enforcement background. So I want to make a plea to Mayor Frey, or I just want this to go directly. Mayor Frey, I would hope that you would listen to a rational discussion. You would be open to a rational discussion and open to people who see things a little bit differently than you do, or actually in this case, a lot differently than you do. Now, my law enforcement background stems a course of 20 years. I've worked in the prison system. I've been a corrections officer in the local county jail here in Las Vegas, and also patrolled the streets of Las Vegas and worked in a variety of different capacities. I worked as gang intelligence officer for the Clark County Detention Center. I was a firearms instructor. I was a active shooter or MACTAC instructor. I was a defensive tactics instructor. And I've been an avid martial artist for most of my life. I don't say all that to impress you. I'm basically saying that to let you know that I come from an area of experience, and I would say an area of expertise. There were times, if I can be real with you for a moment, there were times throughout my career where I kind of took the job lightly. I guess I was blessed over the course of a lot of my career where any physical confrontation that I had, I was able to handle them pretty well. And I would say that's primarily because of the fact that I always took my martial arts training and my physical fitness training very seriously. But it wasn't until I went to street survival training through Calibre Press where my eyes were truly opened to the dangers that lie in almost every situation in law enforcement. As my career moved on, I came across some horrendous challenges. Suicidal people, people that were mentally ill, wanting to harm others. And I would much rather gain someone's compliance through conversation than having to do so by having to use force. I've had calls to where the only details that we had was that an individual was holding another suspect at gunpoint and wouldn't let him go. The SWAT team was notified and they weren't coming out. And the only things preventing this situation from escalating, becoming worse, was my team. And all we had was a ballistic shield and our weapons. And we had to make entry into a structure and deal with it. So I've been on calls to where I had to make entry, where we had to go door to door through an apartment complex looking for an attempted homicide suspect, a man who shot another man in the stomach with a shotgun. And we had good intelligence, good information to say that he was in the area, and we had to, and me and two other officers were the ones who had to go find the guy. I've been attacked by a person who was mentally unstable and violent. I've had to enter cells where there have been individuals who were ripping and tearing at their own wrist, with biting their own wrist and attempting to kill themselves because they believed that we are going to kill them, because they were so high on methamphetamines that they thought that they were hallucinating and believed that we were trying to kill them. The skills that I learned throughout my career and in those classes, the mindset that they point you to, which have helped officers survive in deadly force and high risk encounters, were able to help me and my partners make it out of these situations in one piece. And they've helped countless officers over the years save lives and save their own lives and be able to go home in one piece, go home to their families, to their loved ones. Now, Mayor Frey, I understand that the Philando Castile shooting was a tragic situation, but to use one incident and basically punish your whole force and rob them of the tools and skills needed in order for them to facilitate their job as effectively as possible is foolish and careless, with all due respect. Foolish and careless. Because if something happens to those officers, are you going to be there and are you willing to look their families in the eye? Are you willing to look them in the eye and say to them that you apologize and acknowledge you're wrong by taking those tools away from them? Are you willing to do so? Because in the civilian world, when we understand that 48 civilians, like over recent years, there have been some years where 48 unarmed civilians have been shot and killed by the police. Now, I want to also, as an aside or a caveat to that, I want to reference that just being unarmed doesn't necessarily mean that you're no longer dangerous. But just go along with me just for a moment, just to hear my argument. So we would say that any innocent life that's taken is too many, even if it's just one. Allow me to share with you some statistics, recent statistics. In 2017, 46 officers were feloniously murdered while on duty, meaning someone intentionally killed them with malice. In 2016, 66 officers were feloniously murdered while on duty, which was an increase of 60% from the previous years. Going back to what I said just a few moments ago, any death of any innocent human being we would consider to be too much. Now, granted, every call, the vast majority of calls that officers go on will not require them to use any force whatsoever. Maybe a citation, write a few tickets, something along those lines, if at all, a warning. Maybe some documentation, a police report. maybe nothing at all. So, of course, we don't want cops running around thinking they have to snatch everybody up and that there's a enemy lying at the corner of every call. We don't want officers believing that. And if you really went to the training, you would see that that's not what they're preaching. That's not what they're teaching. You would understand that they remind officers to be vigilant, which is necessary, but also there's a fine line between being vigilant and aware that there's potential danger that's out there. There are bad guys. I mean, after all, you are doing law enforcement work. There are bad people that you have to come in contact with. And to totally deny them of that, to act as if all cops have to do are come in contact with good people every single day is silly. That's absolutely silly. But one death of an innocent human being is too many, for whether they're civilian or whether they are law enforcement. All the information that I'm giving you is through the FBI Uniform Crime Report. In 2017, there were 60,000 officers who were assaulted while on duty. 60,000. 29%, which is nearly a third of those officers, received injuries during these assaults. Now, do these officers matter? Does their well-being matter at all? It's easy to sit back from your office and make a judgment on what type of training and what kind of officers need to be out there. And most agencies, I would guarantee you, the vast majority of training that the officers get are not in an area of force. Most of the time it's in communication, interpersonal communication skills, or documentation, or understanding the laws better. Most agencies, I would dare to argue, that's the majority of the training that they receive. And a very small portion, probably too little of a portion of their training, is dedicated to the area of force, firearms, things like that. If anything, I would argue that the training that the officers get in the area of tactical training is not even close to enough. Because the greater knowledge the officer has in order to determine a deadly force encounter from a less than lethal force encounter, any kind of training that he gets that would help him in that decision making is good. The more time an officer spends using his gun in shoot, no shoot scenarios, the better. The more skilled an officer is in defensive tactics, the better. The better physical fitness an officer has, the better. I believe that the fact that I took care of myself physically while on the department, that I had and maintained a level of proficiency in my martial arts skills, and I also took time to go shoot and train and learn from people that are better than me, it helped me in my decision-making skills as a police officer. Let's look at it from a military perspective. Who would you rather send in an encounter? Your special operations guys who receive the most elite type of training, or a private who has just the bare minimum of training necessary to keep him qualified each year? You want the more skilled, more qualified soldier going in and handling the encounter. That's what you want. And one last thing on this point, I would like to challenge you to do some ride-alongs. Go through some use of force training with one of the local agencies and understand what they have to deal with. But until you're out there and you face these threats head on, you truly don't understand. So I would like to challenge you, Mr. Mayor, in that area, that you would go out there and actually sit back and watch a class. Sit back and read Colonel Dave Grossman. Watch a video, or actually attend the street survival course offered by Calibre Press. Any officer who's out there who hasn't taken one of these classes and you're able to, I highly recommend these classes because they increase my awareness, and I think that they definitely increase my ability to be able to police to a higher level.